Hello dear friend. Welcome to my audio storytelling channel. Comments number 1 if you are ready to dive into the story, and hit the like button if you are not ready to start. Sit back and join me on this emotional roller coaster. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. Let's get started. I had always considered myself a devoted wife. Mark and I had been together for over 7 years, and while our relationship was stable, something had been missing for a long time. He was always so focused on his work, late meetings, business trips, long hours at the office. And as time passed, I began to feel like a shadow in my own life, living in a house that felt emptier with each passing day. I would spend my mornings in the kitchen, preparing his coffee, making sure his clothes were pressed, and seeing him off to work. After that, the house fell silent. The days stretched on without purpose, with only the sound of the clock ticking and the occasional phone call from Mark to break the monotony. I didn't want to admit it, but I was lonely. I longed for connection, for someone who would see me, who would talk to me. But every time I tried to reach out, I was met with distance. My friends were busy with their lives, and Mark was never home long enough to really talk. Then one afternoon everything changed. I was in the backyard tending to the garden when I noticed someone standing by the fence. It was our neighbor Ryan, the guy who lived just 2 houses down. He had recently moved into the neighborhood, and although we had exchanged pleasantries a few times, we hadn't spoken much. He waved, his smile easy and genuine. "Hey Clara, how's everything going over here?" he called out, his voice carrying over the fence. I smiled back, grateful for the conversation. "Oh, it's going well. Just keeping busy." Ryan leaned against the fence, his casual stance giving off an air of comfort. "Well, if you ever need any help around here, don't hesitate to ask. I'm just next door, you know." I was taken aback by the offer. Ryan had always been friendly, but I hadn't expected him to go out of his way like this. Maybe he just wanted to be neighborly, or maybe it was just an innocent gesture. Either way, it felt nice to have someone to talk to. "Thank you, I really appreciate it," I said, my voice lighter than it had been in days. "It's been a little quiet around here lately." Ryan smiled again, and something about the way he looked at me made my heart skip a beat. There was a softness in his eyes, something kind but also a little more intense. "Well, you know where to find me if you need anything," he said before walking back toward his house. I stood there watching him go, a strange flutter in my chest. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just a simple conversation, nothing more. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized just how much I had been craving attention, any kind of attention, to feel noticed, to feel important again. As the days went by, I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan. He would stop by to chat whenever he saw me outside, and with every conversation, the loneliness I had been hiding inside me began to fade, if only for a moment. He was warm, kind, and he seemed genuinely interested in me, not just as a neighbor but as someone he enjoyed talking to. It felt different than the distant conversations I had with Mark. One evening after a long day of housework, I was in the living room reading a book when I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I was met with Ryan's smiling face. "Hey Clara, I was making some extra dinner and thought you might want to join me. I wasn't sure if you had plans," he said, holding up a plate of food. I hesitated for a moment. I hadn't eaten much that day, and the idea of sitting down with someone who actually seemed to care about my day was tempting. It had been so long since I had shared a meal with anyone other than Mark, and even then it was mostly in silence. "That sounds really nice, Ryan," I said, feeling a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in ages. "Great. Come on, I'll set it up in the backyard," he said, stepping back a little. I followed him outside, feeling a sense of anticipation in my chest, unsure of what exactly was drawing me in. Was it just his kindness? Or was there something more? I couldn't deny the fact that, for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Over the next few weeks, Ryan and I began to spend more time together. It started innocently enough, casual chats in the yard, him offering to help with small tasks around the house, and the occasional dinner invitation. He was always thoughtful, always there when I needed someone to talk to, and with each passing day, I felt a growing sense of comfort with him. A comfort I hadn't felt in years. As much as I told myself that it was just friendship, something about Ryan's attention made me feel special again. Every time he complimented me, I couldn't help but smile. His words weren't empty, like the hollow praises I'd received from Mark over the years. Ryan actually noticed me. He listened. He made me feel like I mattered. One evening, after a long day of cleaning and sorting through old boxes, I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened it, I found Ryan standing there, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers. "Hey, Clara," he said with a warm smile. "I thought you might like these. You've been on my mind today." I was taken aback. It was such a simple gesture, yet it made my heart flutter. My gaze dropped to the flowers in his hands. They were beautiful. Lilies, my favorite. "You didn't have to do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, my heart racing. "But thank you." Ryan smiled, stepping a little closer. "I wanted to. You deserve something nice, Clara. I know things have been tough for you lately, and I just wanted to do something kind." His words sank in, and I realized how much I had been craving this kind of attention that felt real, not forced. Mark had always been busy, preoccupied with work, and the moments we shared were becoming fewer and further between. But Ryan, he was always there, always making an effort, always showing up. "Would you like to come inside for some coffee?" I asked, unable to stop the smile tugging at my lips. Felt like the right thing to do. A simple, innocent gesture, but something inside me knew that it wasn't so innocent anymore. I couldn't ignore the way my body responded to his presence. Ryan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I'd love that." We walked inside together, and as we settled onto the couch with our coffee, I couldn't help but notice the closeness between us. The space between us was minimal, and as he turned to talk to me, our knees brushed against each other. I could feel my heart race, and the warmth of his touch lingered long after it ended. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. I found myself laughing, enjoying the conversation more than I had in years. But the longer we sat there, the more I felt something shift. It wasn't just the conversation anymore. It was the way he looked at me, the way his gaze lingered just a little too long, as if he was searching for something. Something I didn't know I was ready to give. Finally, as the night grew late, I stood up to show him to the door. But before I could reach for the handle, Ryan stepped closer, his eyes locking with mine. "Clara," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't deny it anymore. There's something between us, something I can't ignore. And I think you feel it too." I froze, the words hanging in the air like a heavy weight. My heart was pounding, my mind spinning with uncertainty. Was he saying what I thought he was saying? Could I allow myself to feel this way? To cross this line? I don't know what to say. I stammered, my breath shallow. Ryan reached out and gently touched my arm, his fingers brushing against my skin, sending a rush of warmth through me. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that I'm here, and I want to be here for you, Clara. I care about you." His words sent a wave of emotions crashing over me. It was all too much, too overwhelming. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. All I knew was that I hadn't felt this alive in a long time. And with each passing moment, the temptation to lean into it, to give in to the connection between us, was becoming harder to resist. But I also knew that if I let myself fall into this, there would be consequences. There would be no going back. I need time," I said, pulling away slightly, trying to gather my thoughts. "This isn't right. I can't just jump into something with you." Ryan nodded, a flicker of disappointment crossing his face, but he didn't push. "I understand. Take all the time you need, Clara. I'll be here when you're ready." He left that night, and as I stood at the door watching him walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed. The decision I had to make was no longer just about me, it was about everything I had built with Mark. Could I really allow myself to cross this line? Was it worth the risk? The days after Ryan's confession were filled with uncertainty. I couldn't get his words out of my head, couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. I told myself that I needed time, that I couldn't make any decisions without fully understanding the consequences. But deep down I knew the truth. Every time I saw Ryan, my heart skipped a beat. Every time he smiled at me, I felt a spark I hadn't felt in a long time. Mark was still away, and with each day that passed, the emptiness in the house seemed to grow. The silence was deafening. When Mark did call, it was the same routine, quick chats about nothing significant. He asked how things were at home, and I gave the usual answers. Everything was fine. Everything was okay. But it wasn't. And then there was Ryan, the man who made me feel seen, heard, and desired in ways I had forgotten existed. He kept coming by, offering help with the yard or just stopping to chat. And with every moment we spent together, the pull between us grew stronger. One afternoon I was sitting in the kitchen, flipping through an old photo album when I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart skipped as I recognized Ryan's familiar presence before I even opened it. "Hey, Clara." He greeted me with that charming smile, holding up a bag of groceries. "I picked up some ingredients for a homemade dinner. Thought you might like some company tonight." I hesitated for a moment, the temptation too strong to ignore. "You're always welcome, Ryan," I said, trying to sound casual. "Come on in." We walked into the kitchen together, and Ryan immediately went to work chopping vegetables, his movements fluid and confident. The scent of garlic and herbs began to fill the room, and I couldn't help but watch him, admiring how natural he was in the kitchen. There was something magnetic about the way he carried himself, his ease, his charm, the way he made me feel special. As we worked side by side, he would occasionally brush up against me, his touch lingering for just a second longer than necessary. Each time I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, my breath hitching in my chest. But I didn't pull away. Part of me wanted to. "So, how's everything going with Mark?" Ryan asked as he stirred the pot on the stove, his voice casual but with an edge of concern. I paused, trying to figure out how to answer. "Same as usual," I said, keeping my voice even. "He's been really busy with work. He's hardly home." Ryan looked at me for a moment, his expression softening. "You deserve more than that, Clara. You deserve someone who's there for you, who sees you." I swallowed hard, his words hitting me like a punch to the gut. The truth was, I did deserve more. I hadn't realized how much I had been starving for attention, for someone who made me feel alive, until Ryan had come into my life. "You've been so kind to me, Ryan," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to express how much I appreciate it." Ryan stopped what he was doing and turned to face me. There was no denying the intensity in his eyes now. He stepped closer, closing the gap between us, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. "You don't have to say anything, Clara," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I know how you feel." Before I could respond, his lips were on mine. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, like both of us were testing the waters. But as the seconds stretched on, the kiss deepened, and I found myself unable to pull away. I kissed him back, my body responding to him in ways I didn't think possible. For the first time in months I felt alive. But then just as quickly the reality of what I was doing hit me like a wave. My heart raced with guilt, and I pulled away from him abruptly. "Ryan, no," I said, my voice shaky. "I can't do this. I'm married. This isn't right." Ryan looked at me with understanding, but there was still that same intensity in his eyes. "Clara, you can't keep lying to yourself. You've been unhappy for a long time. You deserve someone who will make you feel loved, who will make you feel alive." I closed my eyes, feeling torn between the life I had built with Mark and the undeniable pull I felt toward Ryan. I didn't know what to do anymore. Every part of me wanted to give in, to let go of the guilt and just be with Ryan. But the consequences were too big to ignore. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, my voice breaking. Ryan reached out, gently cupping my face in his hands. "You don't have to make a decision tonight, Clara. Just know that I'm here, and I'll be here whenever you're ready." The days after that kiss were some of the hardest I had ever faced. Ryan's touch still lingered on my lips, and every time I looked at him, I felt an undeniable pull. It was as if a part of me that had been dormant for so long had been awakened. And as much as I tried to deny it, the truth was simple. I wanted him. I wanted everything he represented, the attention, the affection, the spark that I hadn't felt in so long. But I couldn't just ignore my marriage. I had made vows to Mark. I couldn't betray him like this, even if it felt like my heart was being torn in two. I had tried to justify my actions, tried to tell myself that I wasn't really doing anything wrong, that Ryan was just a friend who cared. But the reality was undeniable. We had crossed a line, and the longer I ignored it, the deeper the wound became. Mark was home now, and while I wanted to believe that things would go back to normal, it was impossible to pretend. He was still distant, still caught up in his work. I could feel the gap between us growing wider every day, and no matter how hard I tried to fill it, it seemed like the distance only increased. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, Mark came home early. His face was tired, his shoulders slumped, and the moment he stepped inside, I could see that his mind was somewhere else. He didn't notice the way I tensed up when I heard his footsteps. I had been trying so hard to keep up the illusion of normalcy, but everything felt like it was slipping through my fingers. "Hey, Clara," Mark said, dropping his bag by the door. "I thought we could have dinner tonight. It's been a while since we've had a chance to really talk." The words sounded good, like he cared, but I couldn't help but feel the distance in his voice. It wasn't the same as when we first met. It wasn't the connection we used to share. "Dinner sounds nice," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll start something up in the kitchen." I moved into the kitchen, trying to focus on the task at hand, but my mind kept drifting back to Ryan. To the kiss, to the warmth of his touch. I felt a pang of guilt, but also a longing. Was I supposed to just pretend everything was fine? Was I supposed to keep living in a marriage that had felt empty for so long? Mark came into the kitchen a few minutes later, his presence suddenly making the space feel small. He stood behind me, resting his hands on the counter as he watched me work. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice quieter now. "Is everything okay?" I felt the lump in my throat. How could I explain the confusion, the overwhelming desire, the pull I felt toward someone else? How could I tell him that I felt so alone despite being married to him? That I had been drawn to Ryan in a way I hadn't expected? "I'm fine," I said quickly, turning away. "Just a lot on my mind, I guess." Mark didn't push. He didn't ask more, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was feeling the distance too, even if he didn't understand it. As we sat down for dinner, the conversation felt forced, like we were strangers who had learned how to pretend. I couldn't look at him without thinking of everything I had been hiding. Every word felt like a lie. And as we finished our meal in silence, I felt my heart break a little more. Later that night, after Mark had gone to bed, I found myself standing by the window, staring into the darkness. I felt so torn. My heart was in pieces, caught between the man I had promised myself to and the man who had awakened feelings I hadn't felt in years. Just as I was lost in thought, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps outside my door. My pulse quickened, and I knew who it was before I even saw him. Ryan. I opened the door, and there he was, standing in the hallway, his expression soft but determined. "I know you're confused, Clara," he said quietly, his voice gentle but filled with purpose. "But I can't keep waiting. I can't keep pretending like I don't want you." His words were a reminder of everything I had been trying to fight. The truth was out now. He wanted me. And I wanted him. The question was, could I live with the consequences of giving in? "I can't keep doing this," I whispered, my voice shaky. Ryan stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against mine. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But know this, what we have is real. I'm not going anywhere." I closed my eyes, torn between two lives. One where I could keep pretending and try to salvage my marriage. The other, where I would have to face the consequences of a love that felt impossible, but was so hard to resist. This story is about to take a turn. If you're intrigued, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. Your support means the world. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. The night after Ryan had come to my door, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Mark was beside me, but I couldn't feel his presence the way I once did. I felt suffocated by the weight of my own thoughts. The quiet of the house seemed deafening now, and every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Ryan's face, his hands on mine, the warmth of his touch. How did I get here? How did I end up in a situation where my own heart seemed to be betraying me? I had built my life with Mark, had promised to stand by him, to be loyal, but here I was, trapped in an affair I never intended to begin. Every time I saw Ryan, I felt seen. He saw me in a way Mark hadn't in years, and that truth haunted me. I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I had to choose. The longer I put it off, the more my world would crumble around me. If I stayed in this marriage, would I forever resent the choice I made? Could I truly rebuild it with Mark? Or would I continue down this dangerous path with Ryan, knowing that it could cost me everything? The next morning, Mark left early for work. He kissed me goodbye as he always did, but today it felt different. His lips brushed against mine, but there was no passion, no spark. Just routine. The same kiss we had shared for years, and in that moment, I felt the space between us widen even more. As I went through the motions of the day, cleaning the house, checking emails, I felt the pull of the inevitable. Ryan's visit was still fresh in my mind. I couldn't deny it anymore. I had feelings for him. Strong feelings. The chemistry between us was undeniable, and every time we were together, it felt like we were a magnet, drawn together despite the consequences. By the afternoon, I couldn't stand the silence of the house anymore. I needed to see him. I needed to know if this connection was real, if what we had was just a fleeting moment or something deeper. I grabbed my coat and without a second thought, headed over to Ryan's house. When I knocked on his door, he opened it almost immediately, as if he had been waiting for me. His eyes lit up when he saw me, a smile creeping onto his face. "Clara," he said softly, "I've been hoping you'd come by. I need to talk to you," I said, my voice trembling. I stepped into his house without hesitation, as though I had already made up my mind. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew one thing. Ryan's presence made me feel alive, like I was truly living again. We walked into the living room and sat on the couch, and I felt the space between us shrinking with every passing second. I couldn't keep pretending like I didn't feel what I did. "I can't keep doing this, Ryan," I said, my voice wavering. "I'm torn. I love Mark, but when I'm with you, I feel something I haven't felt in so long. I don't know what to do anymore." Ryan's expression softened, his hand gently reaching for mine. "You don't have to make this decision right away," he said, his voice full of understanding. "But I need you to know that you don't have to stay with Mark out of obligation. You deserve happiness, Clara. You deserve to feel alive." His words echoed in my mind, and for the first time I allowed myself to truly think about what I wanted, not just what I was expected to want. Did I want the safety of my marriage with Mark, despite the emotional distance? Or did I want to embrace something with Ryan? Something unknown but filled with passion and connection. I looked into Ryan's eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel wanted. And with Ryan I felt that. "I've made up my mind," I said, my voice stronger now. "I can't keep living a lie. I can't stay in a marriage that's become a ghost of what it once was. I need to be honest with myself, and with Mark." Ryan leaned in, his lips brushing against mine. It was soft at first, but the moment deepened quickly as I kissed him back with everything I had. I knew this was a risk, but in that moment I didn't care. I was no longer afraid. I had made my choice. The decision had been made, but the consequences were now upon me. I spent the next few days in a daze, each hour dragging on as I tried to process everything that had happened. Mark was still distant, still unaware of the storm brewing just under the surface. He continued with his routine, and I continued to lie to myself, pretending that nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had crossed a line and there was no going back. I hadn't seen Ryan since that day in his living room. I told myself it was best to give it a few days, to let the gravity of my decision settle in. But the pull between us was undeniable. Every minute felt like an eternity, and every time I saw Mark's face, I felt the guilt burn inside me. But when I thought of Ryan, I felt alive again. I hadn't realized how much I had been starving for connection until he came into my life. The silence between Mark and me had become almost unbearable. We ate dinner together, but the conversations were hollow. Small talk about his day at work, about the weather, about anything and everything except what truly mattered. I could see the growing distance between us in the way he looked at me. Like I was a stranger, someone he barely recognized. One evening, as we sat in the living room, Mark turned to me with a solemn expression. "Clara," he began, his voice quiet but serious, "I've been thinking a lot about us lately. About you. And me. And I feel like something's changed. You've been distant. I can feel it. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to be honest with me. Please tell me what's wrong." I froze. My heart pounded in my chest, and the truth almost spilled out. Almost. But then I thought of Ryan, of how he made me feel, how he saw me in a way I hadn't been seen in years. "I'm fine," I said, my voice shaky, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. "Just tired. Work, you know." Mark didn't seem convinced. But he didn't press the issue further. Instead, he stood up, walking toward the door. I think I'll head to bed early. We'll talk more later. I nodded, watching him leave. As soon as the door closed behind him, I felt my entire body relax, the weight lifting off my shoulders. It was the first time in a long while that I felt free. But I knew this freedom would come with consequences. And as much as I didn't want to face them, I couldn't avoid it forever. That night I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was deafening, the tension between Mark and me hanging in the air like a heavy fog. I thought of Ryan, of the kiss we shared, of how easy it was to be with him. He made me feel wanted, loved, alive. But at what cost? The next morning I decided I couldn't go on like this. I needed to talk to Ryan. I needed to be with him. I knew what that meant. I knew the consequences. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. I picked up my phone and called Ryan. It rang twice before he picked up. "Clara," he said, his voice warm, but there was an underlying urgency there. "I've been waiting for your call." I need to see you," I said, my voice low, almost trembling. "I can't do this anymore. I've made my choice." "I'll be right over," he replied without hesitation. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. But it was fleeting. I knew I was walking away from everything, my marriage, my life with Mark, and I couldn't predict what the future would hold. But I also knew I had to be true to myself. Ryan arrived at my door within minutes. He stood there, his expression intense but kind. I opened the door, and without a word he stepped inside. We didn't need to speak. We both knew what was happening. I took a deep breath and looked him in the eyes. "I'm ready," I whispered. "I'm ready to be with you." Ryan smiled, his eyes softening with affection, but there was no arrogance, no sense of victory in his gaze. It was just pure, honest warmth. "You don't have to be scared, Clara. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." I reached for him, and this time there was no hesitation. We kissed again, this time with the full weight of our decision. There was no going back. The line had been crossed, and we were both on the other side now. The next few days felt like an emotional roller coaster. I had made my choice. I had embraced the new life with Ryan, and yet, the weight of my actions haunted me every step of the way. The guilt gnawed at me when I thought of Mark, but there was also a strange sense of relief. I was finally living for myself, finally doing what I had secretly wanted for so long. Ryan and I grew closer. Every time I saw him, every time we were together, it felt like I was stepping deeper into a world where I was truly seen, truly wanted. He was kind, thoughtful, and attentive, everything Mark hadn't been for so long. But as the days passed, the reality of what I had left behind began to settle in. I couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if Mark found out? What would happen if the life I had built with him was shattered beyond repair? I knew I couldn't keep living in the bubble I had created with Ryan. The truth was inevitable. One evening, as Ryan and I were sitting on the couch, laughing about something silly, my phone rang. It was a call from Mark. I froze, my heart racing. I hadn't spoken to him properly in days, and each time we spoke, it felt like we were just going through the motions. But this call was different. Something in my gut told me that Mark knew. I looked at Ryan, who noticed the sudden shift in my expression. He gave me a reassuring smile, but I could see the concern in his eyes. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to answer it." But I had to. I couldn't avoid it forever. I took a deep breath and answered the phone. "Clara." Mark's voice came through the line, tight with emotion. "We need to talk." I swallowed, my throat dry. "What about?" "About us. About everything." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "I know something's been off. I can feel it, Clara. I know you're hiding something from me." I felt a rush of guilt wash over me. My heart clenched, and I knew that there was no way to deny it any longer. He deserved the truth, even though it terrified me. I don't know what to say, Mark," I whispered, my voice shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you." "You've already hurt me, Clara," Mark said, his voice raw. "I don't know what's been going on, but I can feel it. Please just tell me the truth." I closed my eyes, the weight of my actions finally crashing down on me. I looked at Ryan, who was now sitting next to me, his hand resting gently on mine, a silent support. "Mark," I said softly, "I've been seeing someone else. I've been with Ryan." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. and for a moment I thought the call had dropped. When Mark finally spoke again, his voice was barely audible, full of hurt. "Clara, how could you? After everything we've been through, after everything I've done for you, you chose him over me." The words stung and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I had never wanted to hurt him, but in this moment I knew I had. I had chosen Ryan, and I couldn't take it back. "I'm sorry, Mark," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I never meant for it to happen this way, but I can't pretend anymore. I can't keep living this lie." The silence on the other end of the line felt suffocating. Finally Mark spoke again, his voice cold. "Don't come back to me, Clara. I can't do this anymore. I need space. I need time to figure out if I can ever forgive you." And with that he hung up. I sat there, holding the phone in my trembling hand, the weight of his words settling in. Ryan squeezed my hand, but I could feel the storm inside me. Mark had just ended everything. He had just walked away from me. Ryan's touch was comforting, but the reality of my choices felt overwhelming. I had hurt the person who had stood by me for so long, the person I had promised to love. And now there was no going back. Ryan pulled me into his arms, holding me as I cried. "It's going to be okay, Clara," he whispered. "You did what you needed to do. I'm here for you no matter what." But deep down I knew that nothing would ever be the same. I had made my choice, but at what cost? The days after Mark's phone call felt like a blur. I was trapped in the limbo of my own choices, caught between the guilt of what I had done, and the relief that I had finally embraced my feelings for Ryan. Every moment with him felt real, like a breath of fresh air in a life that had become suffocating. But there was no escaping the fallout from my actions. The life I had once known was slipping away, and there was no way to undo the damage I had caused. Mark didn't reach out after that night. He didn't call, didn't text. He simply retreated into the silence, and that silence was deafening. Every time I thought of him, I felt the sting of my betrayal. I knew I had to give him the space he needed, but the emptiness of our home, now devoid of his presence, weighed on me like a heavy cloud. Ryan, on the other hand, was there every step of the way. He supported me, offered me comfort, and promised to stand by me no matter what. But even as I found solace in his arms, a part of me still mourned what I had lost. I had chosen Ryan, but it didn't erase the history I had with Mark. It didn't erase the love we once shared. One evening, about a week after Mark's departure, I was sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space where Mark's things had once been. I felt a pang of guilt, but I tried to push it away. I had made my choice. But then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a message from Mark. "Clara, we need to talk. Please. I'm coming by to pick up my things." I stared at the screen, the words blurring in front of my eyes. It felt like a punch to the stomach. This was it. The end. I had lost him, and now he was finally closing the door on us for good. Ryan walked into the room just as I was reading the message. His face softened when he saw the expression on mine. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting down beside me. I showed him the message and his jaw clenched. "He's coming to pick up his things," I said quietly, my voice breaking. "I think it's really over now." Ryan didn't say anything at first. He just pulled me into his arms, holding me close. "I'm here for you, Clara," he whispered, his voice full of comfort. "No matter what happens with Mark, you've got me." I nodded against his chest, but my heart was heavy. As much as I wanted to believe that Ryan was the answer, I couldn't deny the ache in my chest for the life I had lost with Mark, the love I had betrayed. Mark arrived later that afternoon. He didn't knock. He just let himself in, his eyes distant as he walked past me without a word. I felt my heart shatter all over again as I watched him go straight to the room we once shared, gathering his things in silence. I stood there, watching him move around the room, the man I had spent years building a life with, now a stranger in my own home. It was hard to look at him, but I couldn't look away. I knew I had to speak, say something, anything. "Mark," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." He paused for a moment, looking at me over his shoulder. There was no anger in his eyes, just sadness. "You already have, Clara," he said quietly. "You've already hurt me. I gave you everything I had, and you threw it away." I couldn't speak. The words I wanted to say caught in my throat. Mark finished packing his things, and when he turned to leave, He paused in the doorway. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara," he said. His voice was cold, but there was a depth of pain there that I could feel in my bones. "But don't come back to me. Not after this." And with that he was gone. I stood there rooted to the spot, unable to move. The silence that followed was suffocating. I had lost him. Truly lost him. Ryan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, but I didn't feel the comfort I had once found in his presence. I felt empty. I felt lost. I never wanted it to end like this, I whispered, the tears finally coming. "I know, Clara," Ryan said softly, "but you can't go back now. You made your choice. And I'll be here every step of the way." But I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as sure about my decision as I had convinced myself. In the weeks that followed, something shifted. I started to heal. I started to embrace the life I was building with Ryan, not as a replacement for what I had lost, but as a new chapter in my life. I was no longer living in the shadow of my past, and the guilt that had weighed me down slowly started to fade. Ryan and I grew closer with each passing day. He was everything I had needed in my life. A man who saw me for who I truly was, who loved me for me. We began building a life together. One where I didn't have to hide behind the guilt or the regret. I was free to be myself. There were still moments when I thought about Mark, moments when I felt a pang of sadness for the life I had lost. But those moments were fewer and farther between. I had made the choice, and while it came with its own challenges, I knew it was the right one. Ryan and I began to talk about the future, about plans, about dreams. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of the past, and while it was far from perfect, it was mine. It was real. Clara's journey has been one of difficult choices, emotional turmoil, and ultimately self-discovery. She learned that in order to move forward, she had to let go of the past, forgive herself, and embrace the future. Her decision to move on from Mark was not easy, but it was the first step toward a new life with Ryan. The road to happiness may not always be clear, but Clara's journey shows that it's possible to find peace after heartbreak. What do you think about Clara's choice? Was she right to move on from Mark and choose Ryan? Can she truly find happiness in this new chapter of her life? Comment below to share your thoughts and reflections on Clara's story. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories filled with love, conflict, and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more heart-wrenching, inspiring tales.